Okay. Good morning. We're going to get started. This is the public hearing of the Committee of the Whole regarding Bill number 190-152, 190-153, 190-154, 190-155, 190-317, 190-318, 190-319, and Resolution number 190-164. Mr. Stitt, please read the titles of the bills and resolution.
Bill number 190-152, an ordinance to adopt a capital program for the 6 fiscal years 2020 through 2025 inclusive. Bill number 190-153, an ordinance to adopt a fiscal 2020 capital budget. Bill number 190-154, an ordinance adopting the operating budget for fiscal year 2020. Bill number 190-155, an ordinance amending Chapter 19-1500 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Wage and Net Profits Tax by revising certain tax rates under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 190-317, an ordinance amending Section 19-1301.1 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Homestead Exclusion to increase the amount of the homestead exclusion under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 190-318, an ordinance amending Chapter 19-1300 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Real Estate Taxes by specifying tax rates for tax year 2020 and thereafter, by providing that each such tax year, council shall enact a tax rate consisting of a revenue-neutral tax rate intended to produce approximately the same level of tax revenues as were generated during the prior tax year, and any specified adjustment to the revenue-neutral rate as deemed necessary that tax year, and by making technical amendments, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 190-319, an ordinance amending Section 19-1801 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Authorization of Tax to further authorize the Board of Education of the School District of Philadelphia to impose a tax on real estate within the City of Philadelphia, to specify tax rates for tax year 2020 and thereafter, by providing that each such tax year, the tax imposed by the Board of Education shall be at a rate set by council by ordinance, which shall consist of a revenue-neutral tax rate intended to produce approximately the same level of tax revenues as were generated during the prior tax year, and any specified adjustment to the revenue-neutral rate as deemed necessary that tax year, and by making technical amendments, all under certain terms and conditions. Resolution number 190-164, resolution providing for the approval by the Council of the City of Philadelphia of a revised 5-year financial plan for the City of Philadelphia covering fiscal years 2020 through 2024, and incorporating proposed changes with respect to fiscal year 2019, which is to be submitted by the Mayor to the Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority, the authority pursuant to the Intergovernmental Cooperation Agreement, authorized by an ordinance of this council approved by the mayor on January 3, 1992, Bill number 1563-A, by and between the city and the authority.
Thank you, Mr. Stitt. Today we continue the public hearing of the Committee of the Whole to consider the bills read by the clerk that constitute proposed operating and capital spending measures for fiscal 2020, a capital program, and a forward-looking capital plan for fiscal 2020 through fiscal 2025. Today we will hear testimony from the city, school district, and administration, and testimony from the public on bills number 190-317, 190-318, and 190-319. We will begin the testimony from the administration. Mr. Stitt, the first person to testify from the administration is?
Rob DeBow.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. DeBow.
Morning, Council President Clark. Good morning, Council President Clark, members of the committee. I'm Rob Dubo, Finance Director for the city, and I'm here to testify on bills 190-317, 318, and 319. The bills would increase the amount of the homestead exemption to $50,000 and are designed to set revenue-neutral real estate tax rates, with revenue-neutral being defined as no net increase in tax revenues. While we understand the desire to provide relief to taxpayers, we believe the cost of these bills is too high. The combined cost to the city and school district of the bills would be more than $70 million in FY20 and more than $870 million to FY24. The impact on the district would be particularly devastating. The 5-year cost to the district of the bills would be about $480 million, combined with the $260 million FY24 gap in the district's most recent projections. These bills would create negative fund balances of over $700 million. That would force the district back into the painful days of deciding what programs to cut, depriving our students of the resources they need and likely reversing the progress the district has made over the last several years. The proposals would also create deficits for the city. The bills would combine to cost the city almost $400 million through FY24. That would flip the $150 million positive fund balance projected for FY24 in the city's 5-year plan to a negative fund balance of over $200 million. Like the district, the city would be forced to make painful cuts and scale back crucial investments that have been made over the last several years. Both the city and the district would likely see recent progress in their bond ratings reversed, making it costlier to borrow and harder to make investments in everything from school facilities to road paving. While the bills would be costly, they don't provide targeted relief. Since none of the bills provide relief that includes any means test, they do not do anything to improve equity. They provide the same relief regardless of income, property value, or changes in assessed value. By itself, the Homestead bill would cost the city and school district $145 million over 5 years. Each $5,000 increase in the Homestead costs the school district $8 million per year and the city $6.5 million annually. While the bills do not provide targeted relief, the city does have an array of programs ranging from the senior citizens tax freeze to UPA to LOOP that are targeted to provide owners who have financial needs or have seen dramatic increases in their assessments. The administration understands there are some properties where the accuracy of assessments needs to be improved. That's inevitable when an organization is performing over 460,000 residential assessments. The inevitability of errors is why there's a multi-level appeal process. Property owners can ask the Office of Property Assessment for first-level reviews, and if they're unhappy with the results of that process, they can file a formal appeal with the Independent Board of Revision of Taxes. The fact that there will be some flawed assessments doesn't mean the entire system is flawed. The ratio study OPA conducted in conjunction with the assessment for FY20 showed the assessment was within industry standards. The study showed the coefficient of dispersion, which measures consistency of assessments, was 11% for residential properties, well within the IAA standard of 15% or less. Another measurement is the price-related differential. It measures whether assessments are regressive. And again, OPA was well within standards. Administration is happy to continue working with council on relief measures. We believe these bills are too expensive. That concludes my testimony, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
Thank you, Council President Darrell Clark. Rob, what's the status of the recommendations from members of City Council regarding the Office of Property Assessment? I know we're supposed to be searching for a new head. So what's the status of that individual and then the recommendations that came out of Council's study that looks at reforming the Office of Property Assessment? Yeah. And then last, give us an update of the current lawsuit against the City of Philadelphia Office of Property Assessment regarding commercial and industrial properties being assessed differently than residential properties. So those 3 items, can you just respond just for the record, please?
Yes. So we are working on all of the recommendations. The chief assessor position has been listed. We advertised for it with the assessment industry organization. We've gotten a number of responses, and we're really right at the stage where we're going to start interviewing. So we're making progress there. There was a recommendation about improving the quality of information, and we are putting out an RFP to bring in an outside firm to help us improve that quality. So we're moving on the recommendations. You asked about the lawsuit. The lawsuit actually is going to trial this week.
And last but not least, what are the city's efforts in terms of something I heard significantly while I was on the trail during these last couple of months, and I go and talk to hundreds of people in hundreds of community settings. People say, Councilman, we hear you talking about all these great programs that the city is supposed to offer as it relates to the increase in our real estate taxes, but we don't know anything about these services. So what are we doing to take this to the next level so people will know about homestead exemption, single citizens tax freeze, the new home loan PHL repair program, the $10,000 grant program. Like, what's the aggressive approach so people can take advantage of it and not just think that we're significantly doing assessments each year, which some look at as the same as a tax increase?
Yeah, the Revenue Department's budget actually included an increase in resources for outreach to make sure that people know about those programs. So we will aggressively do that outreach to make sure that people know about them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. Quick question following up on my colleague's point, Councilman Johnson's point. We put a portion, I think it's around $30 million aside for appeals. Can you update us on how that is going, how much we've paid out by way of appeals?
Sure. For the 2019 assessment, there were about 9,000, maybe somewhere between 9,000 and 10,000 appeals. The BRT is in the process of hearing those appeals. They have said they'll be done by the end of the fiscal year, by the end of the calendar year. So they're about halfway through. On average, I think the appeals loss has been about 12% of the value that was being appealed. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I can get you that.
So last year, what did we come in by way of appeals versus payouts and awards based on assessments that might have been incorrect?
Each year, the appeals loss has been in the kind of 10 to 15% range.
Okay. So out of the 30 million that we set aside, only how much of it winds up being utilized?
Vast majority, but we can get back to you with the exact numbers. I don't want to give you a bad number.
Can you get that to the President, please? Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gim.
Thank you very much, Council President. I had a couple of quick questions. One is about the timing of this. So how much did you say that it would impact the city and the school district budget combined?
The combined amount is about it's about 850 million combined.
850 million
yeah.
Over the next 5 years?
Yes.
Okay. And that we have not previously had this discussion with you, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And then I know we haven't passed our school budget, but are you aware of when the school district passed its budget?
Last week.
Last week, okay. And at any point, did it come before the school district that this was a bill that, had this been in discussion with the school district before?
I think very, very late in the process. So I think within probably the last few weeks they knew about it, but really.
The last week?
Maybe the last few weeks.
Okay.
But Ori is here and he can give you more detail on that.
I'll make sure to ask that, but I just wanted to be clear
But
that.
very late, after they had done most of their planning and put their budget together.
And I do think that there's an important conversation that this whole body needs to have about the overall tax policy. I'm just surprised, to have it June 3rd.
Yes.
As opposed to in the fall, which I think is an important time for us to really discuss this. Can you talk a little bit, now we had the homestead exemption, we raised the homestead exemption recently, is that right?
Last year, the homestead exemption was raised from 30,000 to 40,000.
So we raised it, right, by 1/3 last year.
Correct.
And then the proposal is to increase it by more than 50%.
To raise another 25%, yes.
Yeah. And how much of an impact did last year's homestead exemption have on the city budget? Would it be comparable to what's being proposed, or is it more significant?
Yes, it would be comparable, that's right.
So about
it went
30
up,
million
it went
a
up
year.
10,000, so yes, it would be about the same.
Something about 30 million a year, okay. And that was last year that we already did this?
Correct.
Okay. And then I think the final question that I had is similar to what Councilman Johnson was asking. Could the city make a commitment to reach out to every single district council member to offer to do a full explanation of all available programs within a district context setting? I mean, I think people are asking, like, are they available? Yes, they're available. But I think the request is that if a district council member wants, they should be able to come to the city and you have a to-go team of people with all the explanations to sign people up immediately for all the different exemption programs. Is that something that you're
we're happy
committing
to do that.
Okay.
And I believe that revenue actually does go out to community meetings with people who provide that information, but we're happy to do it with each district council
Right.
member.
And I think part of it is not just providing the information, but helping people sign
Yes,
up right there.
that's right. Yep,
Is
I
that
think-
right?
yes.
Okay. So, I mean, I think that that's a commitment that I certainly am looking for because we get calls even as an at-large office about some of this.
And we're happy to work, obviously, with at-large members on that, the same thing.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Parker.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, Mr. DeBoe.
Morning.
My line of question is to follow up on what Councilman Johnson referenced when he talked about the multitude of programs that the city offers relative to providing some form of property tax relief to our residents and or supports. Before I start there, I just need you to take me on a quick stroll through history to tell me how long has the city of Philadelphia been offering the homestead exemption? What year do you remember were you granted that authority from the Pennsylvania General Assembly?
I believe it was around 2012, in that range.
2012. Do
Yeah,
you
right
remember-
around when the AVI initiative was.
Okay. Do you remember how much it was? How much was the homestead exemption when the city was first granted the enabling authority?
I think our original homestead was 30,000.
Was 30?
Yeah.
Okay, so the city of Philadelphia moves to implement AVI. You're granted enabling authority from the state and you start with 30,000. Currently, as we speak right now, what is the amount of the homestead exemption?
40,000.
So we started with 30, now it's 40,000. With that being said, would you happen to know, and even if you don't know the exact number, I want you to just help me with a ballpark number. How many Philadelphians are eligible for the homestead exemption right now?
So anybody who owns their home is eligible for a homestead. There are some people who sign up for other programs, and there are some programs where you can't do them and a homestead. But right now, there are about 220,000 homes, I think, that have homesteads.
About
I
220,000?
think that's the number.
And so when we're talking about ballpark, because this is what connects back, both Councilman Johnson and Councilwoman Gim mentioned it, when we talked about the menu. And one of the things as a district council person that does get a little frustrating from time to time, especially when you walk us through the history that we started at 30 and now we could potentially be moving upwards to even increase it from the 40, that this legislative body has taken a very assertive and aggressive sort of role in trying to even enhance the currently listed menu of opportunities that are available for Philadelphians, but the idea is whether or not people know. So if you tell me we currently have 220,000 residents taking advantage of Homestead, how many more do we think potentially when we look at the number of homeowners in Philadelphia and we sort of exempt those that would be what you call not double dipping, but taking advantage of other programs that wouldn't make them eligible for Homestead? Do you know approximately like how many would we say?
So it's hard to estimate that, but I would guess it's probably somewhere in like the 20 to 30,000 range.
So 20, 30,000. And you mentioned that the revenue department is actively engaged, and you talked about what was included in the proposed budget. Part of those dollars are dollars that would be used to focus on marketing.
That's
the
right.
marketing of the program.
For this program, for the UPA program, for
So that would be UPA,
senior
Loop,
citizen
senior tax freeze, everything.
Yes, yeah.
Well, too, let me just lend my voice to the advocacy for the promotion and marketing of these programs. The private sector gets it done really well in making sure that we understand brands, we understand programs, and they find a way to do it. I hope we will get creative and much more aggressive in taking our message to Philadelphia residents about what is and is not available, because we have a plethora plethora of programs that are available for just about every Philadelphian at every stage in their lives. So I want to make sure that we are marketing that, and thank you.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Green.
Thank you, thank you, Council President. Good morning, Mr. DeBoe. I have a few quick questions. I just want to confirm. As of right now, what is the projected fund balance for FY20?
It is about 200 and for FY20. I think it was give me 1 second to look it up. So in our 5-year plan, the FY20 projected fund balance is $150 million.
150?
Yes.
And FY21?
FY21, 112.
112. 22?
It's 97.
23?
128.
And 24?
153.
Now, 153, now that does or does not include PICA in FY24?
That assumes that PICA will still be in place.
Assumes that PICA gets reauthorized as it currently is for FY24?
Right, it assumes the revenue will flow the same
Exactly.
way.
Okay. And so what is the impact of the current homestead exemption at $40,000 for FY20?
So at $40,000, just 1 second. I hid my testimony from myself, so I have to find that and I can tell you. About 120 million between the city and the school district, I think. I think 120 between the city and the school district.
120
million.
between city and
If
school
I did the
district?
math right in my head.
Okay. What about FY21?
About the same.
So it's
gonna
about
go,
the same through every...
It'll go up a few percent a year, but
Okay,
about the same.
about 120 a year, okay.
Yeah.
And then as proposed with this amendment, the impact at 50,000 for FY20?
It goes up by about 30 million. It goes up by about 30 million.
And that's per year throughout the
Yeah.
entire 5-year plan?
Yeah.
So you're talking about 150 for FY20 and then 150 throughout?
Yeah,
the
that's
5 years.
right.
Okay. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Squill.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is then, the homesteads will only increase with people on the abatement, correct, that are coming off the abatement. So once they come off the abatement, they're eligible for a homestead.
Sorry, say that
Once people come off the abatement, they would then be
again.
eligible
Oh, you're saying the
for-
number of people would
Right,
only...
so that would increase only once they come off the...
There are also people who just haven't signed up, who sign up. So we've had a couple of thousand people sign up within the last few months. So yeah, you have a couple of ways of having an increase in the number.
But normally it'll stay pretty consistent except for,
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
because some people may sell their houses or
Right, and
move
our
title.
projections assume that it stays stable.
Okay. The revenue neutral as far as the assessments and tax rate. What was the cost you said to the city and school district if that bill were to go into effect without any changes in the rate that council would then have to do?
Let me... So the combined cost of the two bills is $875. Homestead, I think, is about $150, so it would be like 700 something million over the 5-year plan.
Just the revenue neutral part, not the
Yeah,
whole
it'd be like 700 something over the 5 years.
700 and something million.
Yeah.
So the initial year would be approximately 150 million?
Something like that, yeah,
Something
between
like
the city and school district.
Because the issue with me is honestly not so much the revenue neutral part, but fixing OPA. Because if we do revenue neutral, allowing OPA to continue its methodology of assessments and appeals and things that aren't correct, we're going to constantly have to be going in and fixing the rate to get additional dollars for whatever we need, whether we need additional dollars for schools or whether we need additional dollars for other services. If we do not fix OPA, none of this matters what we do today. And there's got to be a way that we could either, every year we meet with, during the budget process, we meet and we talk about the CAMA system and other priorities in OPA to fix our assessment process. We have people who have been hit over and over and over again with large increases. So even if we did revenue neutral, somebody went up 40% this year, somebody went up 60% the year before. When you do the revenue neutral, all you do is move the rate a little bit to make it even. But those people who are getting hit the worst, it doesn't affect them, it doesn't help them. So we do not have the ability to help these folks because of the way the assessments are being put out throughout the city. Now, the other issue is we already have a lawsuit with the commercial properties that are suing as a commercial class action suit against the city, saying that there might have been some non-uniformity in how the assessments were done. But put that aside, if we try to do revenue neutral, all you're doing is assisting some folks that maybe stayed the same or went down a little bit to lower their taxes. You're not helping the people who are getting hit the hardest. And there's still sections of the city that have not seen this increase yet, that they're going to see this increase. And that revenue neutral thing that we're trying to do, council's being very reactionary because we want to try to help our residents, but it's not going to help the people who are getting hurt the most. And we need to make sure that if we're really going to do something, people are still going to complain next year if this revenue neutral idea passed, because those people that went up 40% and you only changed the rate 1.2% down to make it revenue neutral, you're not helping them. So we need a commitment from the administration to say that OPA will have some type of methodology that we could all understand, that we could see across the board, that the assessments will be at some type of actual value that we could then go to our residents to help them. Our offices are inundated with concerns and questions to us saying, how are they coming up with these assessments? And we have no answer for them. So if we do the revenue neutral idea, do you see that as a way to fix this problem with OPA and assessments?
No, I think everything you said about the impact on people with large increases in their Assessors Act is right. The revenue neutral bill doesn't get at that. On the methodology is posted now. We posted it up on the website describing how we get to our assessments. We showed both how we got to assessments before FY20 and then how the trending methodology works for this year. And we posted the ratio study, which kind of shows how we do against industry measures. And I know that wasn't there before this year, but that's all up now on the website.
Well, we only went to trending because our assessments were so irregular, and by doing the audit proved that there was some type of discrepancies or maybe flaws in the model.
We did the trending actually because we wanted to be able to dedicate resources to implementing the various recommendations, and knew that to dedicate staff to doing that, we couldn't do more than the trending at the same time. So that was really about making sure that the various recommendations, both from council's audit and from the other outside expert we brought in, that we could dedicate time to making those changes. That's what led to the trending.
I mean, we've been told time and time again that, we do citywide assessments every year because it's mandated by the state, and we have the ability to do that. And time every year, we see that there's challenges with that process. Is there anything that the administration or OPA is looking at to try to modify that?
So we are, again, all the recommendations that came from council and the administration, we were working on implementing. So for example, one of the recommendations was to put in place a validation team. We've already done that. Another was to put a modeling team in place, and we are in the process of doing that. Another was to use outside help to make sure that our information was good. We have an RFP that's together to do that. So we were working on all the various recommendations that we've received. And at this point next year, we'll have CAMA in place, which will also help with this process.
Are we looking to use CAMA next year or do trending?
We're most likely doing trending for 21, and that information we put into CAMA. So that will be the first year's information that will be running through the CAMA system.
So with trending next year, there's possibilities, though, that even some of these same areas that were hit can be hit again with large increases. And even if this so-called revenue neutral went in, it doesn't help the people who are getting hurt the most.
So citywide for FY20, the residential increase is about 3.9%. There were only,
Citywide.
finished, and there were less than 0.5% citywide that increased more than 10%.
Less than 0.5% citywide increase?
More than 10%, yeah.
More than 10%?
Yes.
Well, it must be all my district, so it's...
I mean, it's really, they're very few. You probably had a bunch of people in the 8% range. I think that happened in your district.
Well,
But-
and 8% after a 40% increase is tough to swallow.
I understand.
And so even if you went up, say, 10%, but the whole citywide went up 2%. So say you adjusted 2%, those people are still going up 6%. And the only ones who are getting adjusted are the ones who didn't go up or went down. And they get a break. So there's no...
I mean, there will be values that go up as the values of properties go up.
I agree, and I think we were told initially in 2013 that majority would probably be anywhere between 2 to 4% is an average of assessed increases per year. That would probably be the maximum increase we would see after those large increases. That was the selling point with AVI.
I mean, depending on what happened with the market, right? And the market has been strong for a number of years.
I mean, to have some neighborhoods go up 50%, 100% in 1 year is hard to believe in this area. It's either the numbers weren't right last year or the numbers
None of
weren't
that
right.
happened in 20. There were no neighborhoods that got those kind of increases in 20.
We've had some people this year who went up 40% this year with the trending.
So that would only happen if there was some change to the building that didn't happen, because trends were applied for geographic areas. So if you had something that was like 40%, it means that there was some other change to the property.
When we look at the owner occupants for the citywide, and they're the ones who are obviously being concerned this year because it seems like they're the ones that are trending. Now, you're trending both commercial, all properties, correct?
Correct.
Increases of total properties in just say my district that were up around $800 or close to 800 properties. $800 in 1 year, and that's just with the trending. If you were to even do, say, revenue neutral this year and say you lowered that, what was it, 3% citywide? What was
3
it?
point, well,
3.9?
the residential was 3.9. So, but including commercial, including non-residential, it's more like 5.
So, all right, so instead of $800, it would probably be around $650 that their increase would be. And that...
That's right. If they increase about 8%, so instead they would increase about 3%, right?
But 75% of the households in my district have increased this year again, 75.02, which is so it's every year, year after year after year that's happening. And again, I'm feeling the brunt of it now, and I'm the one complaining the most, but you're going to see other districts next year, the year after, when they start catching up to some of these other areas, and those increases are going to really jump. And I mean, that's why I'm just opposed to the revenue neutral plan of trying to do this, because we're not really getting to the point of helping the folks who need it the most. We're not fixing the assessment process. And
We are fixing the assessment process.
Not by making it revenue neutral, we're fixing it?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I thought you meant that we as a city weren't trying to fix these.
The reason why I'm opposed to the revenue
Oh,
neutral
got it.
process
Okay, yes, understood.
is because we're still not helping the people who are going up the most, and we're not fixing the problem that's creating. We're reacting to something because we have to, and we're still not fixing OPA. Thank you.
Understood. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. DeBoe, the numbers you gave both in the current year and the 5-year plan
Yes.
for the two bills, I mean the two different, one's a combined, I mean 2 bills in one. Could you just break that down again over 1 year and over 5, the difference between the two as well?
Sure. So for the district, the cost is $480 million over 5 years of both bills. Of that $480 million, $80 million roughly is the homestead.
And 400?
400 would be revenue neutral, yes.
Okay, so it's about 5 times the revenue neutral impact. Okay.
For the city, the cost of the bills is around $400 million, and the cost of the homestead is about $65 million.
Okay.
So about 335, I guess, without.
Okay, and to the extent
65.
To the extent that, as we did last year, if we were making the school district whole, city making school district whole, those numbers change to impact on the city.
That's right. You could add the school district and the city numbers together for the homestead, and that would be the impact on the city.
Right. But while my colleague, Councilman Squilla, was talking about this not helping the people that got the highest assessments, net neutrality, the genesis or origin of net neutrality or revenue neutrality, assessment neutrality, whatever you want to call it, the neutrality bill, that approach is there's a lack of confidence in Philadelphia, at least that I've experienced, in the independence of the assessment process, how independent it is from the revenue raising process. And this is one that Dave Glancy talked about for years. Just let me be an assessment. And where neutrality has been introduced and passed, it's for that reason, that no matter what someone's assessment may have, how much it may have gone up, at least they know it wasn't to raise money. It makes things real complicated on the other end in terms of budgeting and having to raise taxes to make up for that if you want to spend more than you spent last year, and I understand that. And the numbers are really high. I mean, you just gave the difference between just a $10,000 homestead and just total neutrality, not having any number in there like 2% or whatever you would choose. And we are in a different position in the city, being a county. We've discussed this privately. That in the other 66 counties, the county is raising revenue for one individual town, village, township. They have multiple, even Allegheny County has 80 some jurisdictions. So the independence of that, and we're talking about a lot of counties that don't assess at all or haven't in a long time. Right. Philly is different, and I'm not sure what the best way of doing that, but I would hope that as we keep working on the OPA issue, and we don't have to go into any details on that. It's really a question, I think, for most people of degree in terms of getting it right or straightening it out, whatever. It's not whether it needs to be straightened out or improved. But on the surface, I understand that net neutrality sounds like a pretty quick answer to not raising revenues, just trying to get it right. And yet the public is convinced and that it plays revenue raising plays a big part in it. I would hope that we can work together because we both represent the same people, and try to come up with something that raises the confidence level that people need to be raised, that the assessment process is neutral in concept and in implementation, that while somebody may have gotten hit hard this year, there's an absolute reason, justifiable reason for it, and not people that are scratching their heads trying to figure out, with nothing selling for much more than it was selling last year or the year before, and we're not talking about the districts where that outside center city donut keeps getting larger and larger. But the majority of the homes in that 220,000 pool that lie outside that donut, and they're just happy if they can sell their house, let alone get what they think it's worth, that we can come up with something that gets us to either not feeling we need neutrality in a piece of legislation, or where we have something that we can agree on. And I realize that particularly on the neutrality side, this came up after and it's a much different discussion when it's for this year as opposed to next year. And rather than put a date on it for next year, I think we can have some more honest discussion about it. And I think my colleague, who was my chief co-sponsor, Councilman Dom, would agree with me on what I've been saying. But I appreciate your concern, but I also appreciate the enormity of the number that hits the 5-year plan. And but I also think that when you take a percentage of $5 billion budget and you look at a $10,000 homestead, you're talking somewhere in the 0.00 single digit 2, 3, 4 range, 0.4% that you're talking about. And whether it's a school district or the city, we've got to realize that those 220,000 people, most of whom live outside the donut, and are just in stable neighborhoods, hopefully, that are holding their own or trying to hold their own, that they count too. And they count as much as our education system, they count as much as our city operations. We have to keep them strong. And the homestead is one of the few ways we have to keep them strong and to recognize that they are getting hit with increases while we're still trying to fix an OPA system that, to whatever degree you may think it's out of whack, it's out of whack. And one of the things that comes up constantly when people are trying to figure out how did they do this, and I'm not talking about the 15% increases, I'm talking about the increases that just appear to be out of nowhere compared to what homes are selling for on their block, have been selling for years, is that there's an abated, a tax abatement was built 2 blocks away, 2 houses, somebody tore something down or there was a vacant lot, and they'll get another 100,000, 150,000 because 1, there's a tax abatement, 2, it's a brand new property and not an old property like most of the neighborhood. And that's the only thing that's driving this, because nothing else seems to be. They can't access the individual homeowner can't access OPA to get the information, to make a decision on whether to appeal, whether to ask for first review. And again, first review is the judge and jury being the same person that did the assessment to begin with, and not giving them any information to base it on. So it's a real complicated system, but I think net neutrality will be out there until we come up with something that convinces people that the process is honest, that it's not revenue generating as a priority, and that it's more transparent to the taxpayer, much more transparent than it is now. But I appreciate your testimony. I appreciate your work on this and trying to come up with solutions.
I just want to say a couple of things. I completely agree that it's important that people have faith in the assessment system, and we need to work to make sure that that happens. I do want to emphasize that we're really clear with OPA that their job is to get assessments right, and that they are completely separate from the revenue generating side of it, and we'd never talk to them about generating revenue because that's not their job. So just want to make sure that that's clear and understood. The other thing I just want to point out, I know you talked about the hit being a small part of our budget. We actually, in our budget, there's not a lot of flexibility because of our fixed costs and things like police and fire that we know we're going to put in. So numbers that may seem like a small percent of our budget have a big impact on what we're able to do.
Okay. The homestead expenditure, just for the record, I'll make it clear, is your estimate of what you're going to bring in just from assessments this year to the city revenue stream larger or smaller than the proposed $10,000 homestead exemption will cost us? And if it's larger or smaller, by how much?
So for the general fund from FY19 to FY20, and it's kind of a quirky year because of the impact of the tolling legislation. So looking at the 2 years is a little off. There's about a $50 million increase, but taking out the tolling impact, that difference would be a lot smaller. But I mean, the answer to your question is the amount we take in would be a little larger than the impact of the bill.
It would be larger,
yeah.
but considerably larger. Depending on how many $1 million you think is considerable. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Green.
Thank you, Council President. I just want to follow up on questions that Councilmember Squilla asked regarding OPA and the future of the leadership of OPA. And if I remember correctly, we're currently doing a search for a new chief property assessor for the city?
That's correct.
Okay. As part of that search process, is there any language in that request for that personnel discussion regarding CAMA?
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Discussion regarding CAMA. Any information in the job description in reference to that person coming into the city of Philadelphia that has experience on implementing any type of CAMA system?
There are requirements about the type of experience. I don't think there's something specific that says something about implementing a CAMA system, but that's definitely something that we would look for as we talk to potential candidates.
I guess the reason I raised the question because this is something I brought up, as you know, consistently since first joined this body, actually before I joined this body, about the exorbitant long time it's taking us to bring the CAMA system to fruition. In fact, even during testimony when we're talking about the methodology of how the Office of Property Assessment does assessments, that information is not available for the public or even City Council. Part of the reason why it's not available, because from my recollection from the testimony that you provided, is that we don't have a CAMA system. So I guess my question is the fact that we've had so many years in getting this system implemented, and now we're about to bring in a new chief property assessor for the city of Philadelphia. It seems to me that would be part of the job description that this person would have the ability or has had a past track record of implementing this type of system, considering all the issues and concerns people have raised, not only in this hearing, but in past hearings regarding the reliability of the assessment process in the city of Philadelphia.
And as I said, that will be something that when we talk to candidates, we will emphasize and make sure that that's an area where they have experience. I do want to also say, in terms of the methodology, it is up on the website.
Oh, it is up on the website?
It is up on the website,
Okay.
yes.
As of when?
It's been up over a month.
Okay. So still somewhat recent, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, that's just, I mean, I think just from listening to my colleagues and their questions, and in particular, Councilmember Squilla's concern. I think that's a legitimate concern that people just fundamentally do not have a trust in the assessment process in the city of Philadelphia. We went from before we brought in actual value initiative when we had a very challenging means of how you compute your property taxes with a common level ratio and all those type of things. We went to AVI, and then we're now kind of in a AVI Part 2 scenario. Part of that because we don't have the canvas system as well as other issues, and people just don't have a trust in the numbers they're getting from the city. I think that causes the challenges that we are seeing today and will continue to see going forward until we can give people a reason to believe the type of assessments that they're receiving.
I understand that we have to do that, and we have to build that trust.
And I think, and I would agree with Councilmember Squilla that we'll be in this seat once again next year and ongoing if we don't have a realistic perspective of how we're going to be able to get to a point where people can trust in data, trust the information they're receiving from the city regarding their taxes.
Understood.
Thank you. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Well,
A couple of, if you sit here long enough, and the good news about seniority is you hear a lot over time. And if I recall, and you were in these chambers as well, there was a time when we were trying to make $1 out of 50 cents, willing to borrow from any place to salvage the school system. I remember young, aggressive advocates named Gim coming in and beating the drum for public education. I kind of remember that. And here we are in a situation where at least there is some stability within public education by way of us not having to lay off teachers, lay off more counselors and things like that. So we're in at least a stable place. Won't codify it as a good place, but I've been to enough graduations over this season to see that we are moving in the right direction. SLA, one of the graduations I had opportunity to go to, in their presentation said, but we still don't have a music teacher, and we still don't have some of the things they need. They are making do with a little more confidence about predictability about their budget. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
All right. Second thing, I remember sitting in this chamber when you were talking about I think it might have been as low as a $30 million surplus. What was the all-time low?
Well, we had negative fund balances during the recession. Yeah, and when we came out of that the first year, I think our fund balance was under $100,000. So
today we have approximately 300, what?
We ended last year at 368, and as we talked about before, for FY20, we're projecting ending with 150 million.
All right, so I just want to, for the record, say, and if I recall, Mr. President, when asked if we would raise the millage rate, I think even this year, we refused to do it as a body. Is that correct?
Last year, yes.
Last year, right?
Yes.
So we did not increase the millage rate and put that burden on homeowners. Is that correct?
Sorry, what?
We did not increase the millage rate like you guys asked, and we still managed, based on AVI and the value of properties in the city of Philadelphia, to produce that surplus. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. So now, the average value, if I recall back then, was about $99 billion at one point worth of taxable real estate in the city of Philadelphia. Is that correct?
That sounds right. And
what is the rate of taxable real estate in the city of Philadelphia now?
I think it's at least 125. I don't have it in front of me though. 125 billion at least,
right,
but I don't have it in front of me.
We are constantly moving in the right direction. What we're debating now is that impact on certain communities by way of tax rates and things like that, which I understand why my colleagues are fighting so hard for. But I want to say it's not all bad news, because when my grandmother left her house it might have been in a certain area that had that negative net worth. It is now an asset to our family, an asset because the property value actually went up, which allows people to buy, which allows people to borrow, which allows neighborhoods to improve based on that. So I don't want, in particular, middle neighborhoods, I want us to understand that it isn't all bad news. It is growth and stabilization for many neighborhoods in the city of Philadelphia. Is that correct?
I agree.
All right, so you should say that every now and then, as opposed to just responding to all of the negative impact. There is some positive impact. Finally, I think it's important for us to note that how do we compare to other cities by way of property values? Saying, have you done any analysis on that?
Of whether our total valuation?
Yes.
So, I've not looked at other major cities.
All right, so
They tend to be, and one of the things that differentiates Philadelphia from other places is city government is less reliant on the property tax than other places. Most places have property tax as their primary tax, and as you know, we have the wage tax as our primary tax.
So I remember the Philadelphia where we were, oh me, oh my, about our city's future. We at least are stable. We're trying to create stabilization for the long-term residents so that it's not all new residents that come in and take advantage of this. That is a good thing to be discussing and debating in these chambers. It is not all bad news.
Agreed.
And I'm gonna need you to say that every now and then. Thank you.
Thank you for the
Mr.
suggestion.
All right.
Thank you, Councilman. Mr. DeBoe, appears to be all the questions for you. Are you going to hang around?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Thank you. I think, Mr. Munson, are you next? Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Council President Clark, and members of the committee. I'm Ori Monson. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the School District of Philadelphia. I'm here to explain the impact on the school district of Bills 10317, which would increase the amount of the Homestead Exclusion, and 10318, the revenue neutral tax rate. Let me begin by saying clearly the passage of the two bills, particularly so late in the budget cycle, would have disastrous impacts on the school district of Philadelphia and contribute to unwinding the progress we've made over the past few years. The dollar figures involved are staggering. The change of the Homestead Exclusion would cost the school district about $17 million in fiscal year 20, more than $85 million over the life of our newly enacted 5-year plan. The revenue neutral bill is even more significant, reducing district revenues by nearly $25 million next year and just over $400 million over the next 5 years. Combined, it's $42 million for the district beginning in just a few months and nearly $500 million over the next 5 years. This past Thursday night, the school board adopted its fiscal year 20 budget based on revenue estimates which assume no changes in tax rates or policy. The adopted budget continued the district's recent practice of making sustained and sustainable investments, the types of investments which have resulted in increased graduation rates, higher literacy rates, and students' 3-year academic growth rates for literacy and math outpacing the state average. The FY20 budget expands the district's early literacy efforts to the 4th and 5th grade, provides more ESL teachers, modernizes an additional 141 classrooms, adds nurses and counselors, and increases investment in our facilities. These investment decisions are made in the context of what the district will be able to support and sustain over at least 5 years to prevent a churn of increasing investments followed by rapid cuts. These investments would never have been made had we known council would consider reducing our revenues by $42 million in the coming year. The loss of these revenues would require the district to immediately begin scaling back these investments, as the district would be facing a projected deficit over $40 million in fiscal year 21. The school board would be considering a budget next May, which makes cuts in student supports and staff, undermining the progress of our students. These bills would also undermine the core sustainable recurring revenues which have served as the basis for the district's return to fiscal stability, and which were cited by Moody's when the district was upgraded to investment grade status for the first time since 1977. Passage of these bills puts the district bond rating at risk before we can even reap the benefits through cheaper borrowing. In short, the proposed bills have an immediate and significant impact on the core, sustainable, recurring, predictable revenues the school district relies on in order to make investments in our students, staff, and schools. I strongly oppose Bills 190317 and 190318. That concludes my testimony, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions from the floor.
Sorry, multitasking. Thank you, Mr. Munson. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gim.
Thank you very much, Council President. Good morning. Good afternoon, rather. So when did the school district pass its budget?
Last Thursday evening.
Okay. And then how extensive have your conversations been? Oh, and why don't you say again, for the record, what would be the impact on both these bills on the school district's budget?
For the coming year, about $42 million reduction in revenues.
And when was the first time that you really had discussions about this with City Council?
We first heard about it about 2 weeks ago as we were trying to assess the impacts of it and actually raised it before the board when the board met with City Council the 23rd, I believe. That week, as part of its meeting, we raised the issue as a concern to council. That was when we were pretty much about 10 days ago when we were able to fully understand that it was up for discussion and what the impacts would be.
And at this point, there's no ability for the school district to have any kind of maneuvering here. It's just going to be a slash and burn if something like this were to go through?
We'd have to look. I think the biggest issue for us would be we have sufficient fund balance for 1 year. The bigger issue is we don't want to add things next year that we then have to take away the following year. So in order to ensure we can maintain, the first things we'd be looking at all the investments I listed, the new ESL teachers, increased nurses and counselors, things like that.
Social workers and the comprehensive high schools.
Correct. Everything that would be new rather than, we want to make sure we can sustain what we have.
Right.
So the first things I would be looking at to make reductions in strategically would be things that haven't actually happened yet.
Right, and I think many of them have been urgent issues that have been raised within this council body by multiple members as well about concerns about, the safety of young people, health and well-being, trauma-informed care, dealing with crisis. So, one of the things I do appreciate the investments that have been made. I'm actually pushing you to make more, obviously. So I know also that you were the former CFO for Montgomery County, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And Montgomery County for a long time has been revenue neutral, is that correct? Or has practiced?
Well,
under your tenure, did it not practice revenue neutrality in its?
Montgomery County hasn't done a reassessment since 1997.
That's, I think, what we wanted to ask a little bit. So
yeah,
can you talk a little?
By default, revenue neutral, it's not. So the county has not done a reassessment since 1997. There are multiple taxes. So the county has its tax. Every school district within the county does its own taxing. And every municipality, there are 62 municipalities, I believe. But so there's actually this great chart you can look on the county website of every different municipality, which school district falls in, and how you add up all the different tax rates to get to the total millage rate. That is all based on, again, property values that have not changed since 1997, other than those related to basically new building or substantial changes. But the overall, there's been no reassessment.
Yeah, and so as a result, how has that impacted your requirement to raise taxes? Did you raise taxes in Montgomery County?
So the county body raised taxes once while I was there. I can speak to municipality I live in. Lower Merion raised its taxes every couple of years. The Lower Merion School District had raised its taxes every single year by at least 3%. I can speak personally from, I believe it was from 06 to 15, so a 10-year period. The school tax went up 50%. The tax rate went up 50%, 50.3%.
Right. So this idea of revenue neutrality doesn't mean that tax rates don't go up or that revenue is not necessarily needed. It's clear that even in this particular case that Montgomery County had to, either the school district or the county had to raise taxes consistently over a period of time. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And it sounds like you said from '06 to 2015 at least, consecutively.
Yes. It's lower. I know that school district intimately well, and has raised taxes, I believe, every year for at least 14 or 15 straight years, if not more than that.
And so when revenue neutrality hits amidst a reassessment, how does that work?
The concept is that you reset the tax. You start by going through the entire process, having all the values, and then resetting your tax rate so that the net total gives you the net revenue you had the year before, and then you can determine whether or not additional revenues are needed by the taxing body. So the idea is that within the municipality or county, or whatever it is, the relative share of taxation changes, and then again, the total revenues increase based on a change in the rate once the new rate is established. But it's an earlier process. You actually have to have the values much earlier in the process, be making budget decisions early, determining what the needed amount of money is, and then having a proposed rate that gets you with the new, based on what the new revenue neutral rate would be, to get you to the revenues that are determined to be needed by the body.
But I think what my colleague, Councilman Squilla, had mentioned was that property owners that have had significant increases in assessment will actually proportionally bear more of the burden because it's not going to change the assessments.
Correct. In fact, in some ways, if you have others that have either not changed or gone down, they'll even have a higher proportionality of an increase because they now make up a larger value of the total body politic percentage.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman O.
Thank you very much, Council President. Well, good afternoon. So I'm interested in your position on this. Basically, you're looking at a shortfall to school district funding if this bill were to pass. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, as outlined in your testimony. And, my concern is that the school district does anticipate revenues from property taxes, and so the school has an idea how much money it will receive based on property taxes.
Correct.
Okay. And my concern has been that the assessments, as I have said, I believe are inaccurate and untrustworthy, and therefore I would like to reject those tax increases as a way of correcting OPA. But that would leave you with a similar problem, would it not?
As you've constructed it, yes, it would.
Yes. But the issue is, if we were to accurately assess properties, some of the properties are underassessed, some of the properties are overassessed. Somewhere there, it may be revenue neutral as in fact, or it may actually reduce. I think it will overall reduce the city taxes. I think the city taxes overall are improperly too high. So if it were going to, in fact, if we accurately assess properties and we had a big decrease in overall taxes and the school district received less money, it would still be the same problem, would it not?
So you have to clarify the language a little bit, the difference between assessments, tax rates, and the resulting tax.
Yeah, so we're not doing any tax rates. We haven't increased taxes. There's just assessment increases that increase taxes.
Correct, which presumably, and again, leaving aside and whether or not you believe they're accurate or not, if property values are actually going up, assessments should go up.
Yes, if they are.
It's kind of in most places would be a good problem to have in
If
that
they're
regard.
improperly being assessed overly high,
Or too low.
yeah, or too low, but I only deal with like most of the complaints which are overly high, then if we corrected that, there would be a reduction in the money that the school receives. Still,
If you assume the premise that they're incorrect now, then yes, that.
yes. And so what I see is the city is providing revenues to the school district to make up a shortfall. The property assessments are too high, and it has resulted in more money to the city and more money to the school district, but that needs to be corrected. What I believe is when the parking authority was taken over, that it specifically stated $45 million to the schools, and that over 16 years is $720 million, of which the school has only received 89.9. The formula's changed and all that, I understand that. But my point is, the city now receives a portion of that money that was predicted at about $45 million because of the obligation the city would have, because the city is providing the school district money from the city for schools that the state isn't providing. It seems like, the city is providing money to the school district from overassessed, overtaxed properties. The city receives some money from the parking authority, which originally was taken over to fund the schools. Some of that money goes to the schools or not. It seems like we're overall taxing and penalizing Philadelphians a lot of money when we don't have to do that. It just seems that we could just directly provide funding to the schools on a more accurate basis. In other words, a car that is parked too long at a street gets a ticket, pays for a parking meter, pays for a parking lot, and that money then, if we knew what it was transparent, and if we had some accountability, we could provide to the schools, to the city. But overtaxing, overassessing property is not a way to generate money for the schools, in my opinion. And I do believe we have a surplus money we could look at providing to the schools, but, the issue that I think we're dealing with is ultimately, are we taking too much money, and I would say wrongfully, from homeowners in order to fund things?
So there are a couple of pieces to all that. First of all, what I will say is the majority of school districts nationally rely primarily on property taxes. So property tax is the basis, in part because it is, economically speaking, a recurring revenue source that is sustainable, rises naturally for the most part. So that's not a Philadelphia issue as much as it's just the general approach to, in most places, taxation. Second of all, you talked about that the city was short, that the district was short on revenues, so that so increased assessments to fill that gap. I would actually beg to differ with that approach because I think it's a chicken and egg thing, in that the last few years, because there's a 5-year plan with a baseline of what assessment growth is, we know the projected revenues, and we're actually budgeting our expenditures to try and meet those revenues, so we're not going above and not creating those large gaps. So I would agree with you if we were coming forward and saying we have this big gap and we need the money, and then come the assessments. In fact, we have that 5-year projection, which gives us some comfort and ability to do that kind of reliability. The third piece, and when you bring in the parking authority and there are other taxes and pieces, I actually agree, and I've, in various positions and jobs I've held of, Philadelphia taxes and a lot of discussion, I don't think there's anything wrong with having a comprehensive discussion about Philadelphia's entire taxing structure, everything from property tax, business taxes, property taxes. I actually think that, personally, speaking for myself, not necessarily for the district, but with Philadelphia's kind of convoluted Byzantine taxation system, is the result in large part because of a series of annual one-offs. Do this, do that, this, do this year. And I would personally rather see a discussion, both because of its impact on the district and the city itself, of actually looking at the entire taxation system and how you do it to have it be more logical, make more sense, rather than do yet another series of one-offs. In this case, this year it's on the property tax, other years it's been on business tax, which actually sends us further down the rabbit hole as opposed to actually creating a logical, transparent system so that folks understand what they're paying and why.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'm gonna, there's no answer to my question, I understand. I'm just gonna say that it seemed like there was a kind of like a stability in terms of the expectation of the school district, and now there isn't. And it just seems like this type of thing can happen continuously until that stabilization occurs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Mr. Munson appears to be all except Councilman Dunn.
I wanted to thank you, Council President. Could we call back the Finance Director, Rob DeBoe?
Sure. Mr. DeBoe?
Stay.
Yeah.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I don't really have, I have a couple of questions, but I just want to state some facts. I want you to make sure that you can agree with me on the facts. And that is that in 2014, the real estate tax revenue of the city was about $1.077 billion in 2014.
I don't have that number with me, but
we have that information. Okay. And in 2020, it's gone to $1.7 billion. So it's almost a 60% increase. And I'm bringing these up because I think what we're hearing today and what we've all heard is that people are feeling the increases. But whatever way it happens, they're just feeling these increases. And so we've gone up almost 60% in real estate taxes in 6 years, across the board, just as a general rule. And then in the last 4 years, the budget for fiscal year 17 was, I guess, 4.139, and it's projected in fiscal year 20 to be close to $5 billion, 4.995. And that's like an $850 million increase in 4 years, 21%. And people are feeling that. And so my question, though, is, and I think everyone in this room is in favor of funding schools. I don't think that's an issue at all. How much of the $850 million per year increase in the last 4 years has actually gone to the school system?
so our contribution to the district has gone up, I think it's $130 million on an annual basis. So there's 130 for that. But as you know, some of the other big cost items are things like increases in our pension contribution. That's a big part of it. Increase in healthcare costs. So there are kind of a variety of issues. There have been increases due to collective bargaining agreements for things like police and fire. So there's the pre-K program that didn't exist 5 years ago. There's debt service for rebuild. So there are a lot of things that we've all talked about over the last few years that are important investments for the future of the city that come with a cost. So yes, costs have gone up. And I also want to, when we talk about assessments, one of the things that we talked about really kind of from the beginning of your time here is that you thought, and we also agreed, that assessments were probably lower than where they should be, and that an accurate assessment system would see some increase in assessments, and I think we have seen some of that.
No, again, I guess my point is that I think the residents of the city are feeling that 21% increase in our budget over the last 4 years, because they got used to, in the prior 8 years, an increase of about, it was meaningless, I don't know, $80 million went up over 8 years. And I know there was a recession, but I'm just saying going forward.
I think if you looked at the 4 years before, as opposed to the full 8 years, if you took out the cuts during the recession, right, you would see increases that were much more in line with the percents that you've seen over the last 4.
Has there ever been a point in history where in 4 years, this budget's gone up $855 million?
I think there have been points where it's gone up the same percentage increase, but off different base.
Not the dollar increase, right, not the dollar increase. And so looking forward in the next 4 years, What are we looking at as far as the next 4 years, as far as an increase?
Yeah, so the obligations in FY20 are projected to be 4.995. By FY24, they're projected to be 5.4.
So about
400 million.
400 million. So half of what we just saw roughly.
That's correct.
So people feel a little more comfortable with that.
Right.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for testimony. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman. Gentlemen, I'm sorry. Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
Thank you, Council President. I just had another question as well. So, and Council President, you probably can also follow up on this as well. So if revenue neutral was the method moving forward, we would still be having to raise taxes to fill in that gap for the school district regardless moving forward anyway?
You want me to answer? I'm supposed to be budget neutral.
So I'm going to go with you, Ori.
So you're saying if the revenue neutral bill passed and we wanted to provide the school district with the level of funding
we
that's
have to make
projected
that
in
money
their
one way or the other, correct?
we would raise, yes.
So we would still be raising taxes one way or the other down the
Yes,
line.
we'd be raising taxes or, as we talked about in testimony, having to reduce expenditures.
So I'm going to tell you what the biggest issue is, and I think a couple of my colleagues mentioned this before. It all revolves around the assessments, right? And making sure that it's done in a fair way. And again, I started off my conversations talking about the recommendations from council. We know internally the administration has also took a look at it, the process in itself. And we're looking just for the level of urgency. Like, in other words, if there's going to be a new head of OPA, right, that should have been done last month, 2 months ago when we first started this process, at least in our minds, because, again, we're out there in the community. We're going to these community meetings. And I know a lot of times there are issues that divide neighborhoods here in the city of Philadelphia. If there's one issue that will bring us all together, is this issue of increasing real estate taxes. And I'm one of the individuals who represent, in my district, 15 different neighborhoods. And this is a common theme, even all the way out in Southwest Philadelphia, where there's not a significant amount of development taking place. But when we looked at the map that was put together regarding where taxes are increasing, just about all the areas in the second councilmanic district, some higher than others, but for the most part, the common person still feel that bump and that increase. And so I think what our main concern is down here is, like, we know what the tax relief measures are and aggressively getting that word out, but really fixing that process of each year, you got an assessment increase, and with all due respect, before we were going to do an assessment increase and a tax increase, but we kind of held up on the tax side and just let the assessment process move forward. And I think that's what you're hearing today. I just want to put that out there for the record, but I also recognize that in going over this policy with my staff is, okay, if you do move forward with the revenue neutral component, at some point in time, there's going to be a conversation about raising the real estate taxes on those very same people that you're trying to help, which really put us in the quagmire one way or the other. So I just wanted to state that for the record.
Thank you, Councilman. Actually, I think there are going to be a number of things that will impact the future as it relates to revenues. I mean, there's going to be a thoughtful, hopefully, a thorough conversation about tax abatements as we move forward. I don't think anybody thinks that it will continue at the same level, 100%, 10 years in its entirety. I just got to believe there's going to be some changes. So any revenues realized from the altering of the 10-year tax abatement could potentially go somewhere. So there'll be a lot of things. There needs to be obviously some further discussion with respect to a number of the various taxing policies, a much broader discussion. So as we move ahead in the next year or so, we need to be mindful of that, and just want to say from this council, there will be some conversations about this whole policy. Councilman Johnson just touched on the issue with respect to the council recommendations, and you followed up with responses, but timing is everything, because as he said, we did have this discussion some time ago, immediately following the audit. So we're going to be asking you to put some timelines on the implementation of the recommendations. No, I had a conversation with you about the leadership.
Right, and we can send you a document that has the timelines.
Okay, all right, because that would be very helpful before the next budget discussion. It comes sooner than you anticipate. We'll be here talking about what we're going to do for the next fiscal. So, gentlemen, can you both hang around, obviously, because we're...
Sure.
Thank you. We have, I believe, 3 individuals from the public. Mr. Stitt, you want to read their names? We can ask you to come up, testify.
I apologize if I say your last name wrong. I believe the first name is Maggie Mund,
Please come up.
Thomas Vernon, and Walter Spencer.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Maggie Mund. I'm the president of the Center City Residents Association. I thank you for your time. I have some prepared testimony. It doesn't tread much new ground over what's already been discussed here, but the board did authorize me to come forward and make this testimony, so I've waited 3.5 hours, so I figure I better get it in the record. CCRA was an early supporter of AVI, testifying before this body in June of 2012. Although many of our members have had to go through the appeal process, and it is taking longer than we'd anticipated to get the assessments correct, the association still firmly supports fixing real estate assessments at fair market value and performing reassessments on a regular basis. And CCRA understands that as Philadelphia becomes a more and more desirable place to live, home prices are bound to increase, and real estate assessments will rise accordingly. Indeed, many within the CCRA boundaries in the city generally have seen their assessments increase multiple times in the last 6 years. These assessment increases have resulted in substantial increases in homeowners' real estate bills, notwithstanding the fact that the real estate tax rate has remained the same since 2016. In fact, many homeowners are becoming increasingly cynical about their assessments, disdainfully referring to them as backdoor stealth increases or taxation without representation, because they require absolutely no action by council or the mayor. And such tax increases have resulted in substantial increase in the real estate tax revenue collected by the city, as well as substantial increase in city expenditures, all without explanation of the need for this enhanced tax revenue and expenditures. In our view, the concepts embodied in Bills 190318 and 190319 would eliminate these stealth tax increases. These bills, similar to laws already existing in many municipalities throughout the Commonwealth, as well as in other states, would bring transparency to the process. This follows from the fact that unless council and the mayor approve an increase or a decrease, the real estate tax rate must be revenue neutral. That is set at a formula-driven rate that will produce the same level of real estate tax revenues as were generated in the prior tax year. Accordingly, the council and mayor make a legislative change. Unless the council and mayor make a legislative change, the real estate tax rate would decrease if total tax assessments increase, and the rate would increase if total tax assessments decrease. Contrary to the comments of some of the critics of these bills, they are not Grover Norquist type no new taxes pledges. Instead, they will not necessarily result in less taxes. Instead, they specifically contemplate that more real estate tax revenue might be needed in the future, but they require a transparent explanation for any proposed adjustment in the revenue neutral rate, as well as a vote by council. Quoting from language contained in both bills, when the mayor submits the proposed annual operating budget to council, the mayor shall advise council of the adjustment, if any, the mayor recommends be made to the revenue neutral rate, together with an explanation of why the city's revenue needs justifies such recommendation. Council may adopt the mayor's recommended adjustment or adopt any other adjustment. Many CCRA members have complained about the substantial increases they have seen in their real estate tax bills each year, making it difficult to budget and plan for the future. And we're talking multiple 40%, 60% tax increases year after year. And many have advocated for some sort of cap on the amount that one's real estate tax could increase from year to year. We have explained that these bills will not put a cap on such increases, something that probably would require, at a minimum, legislation at the state level and probably an amendment to the uniformity clause. These bills are far more modest. They merely would bring into the sunlight what have been stealth tax increases and require a reasoned explanation for going behind the revenue neutral rate. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Sir.
I'm Dr. Tom Vernon, a retired public health physician, a resident of Center City, District 5, for almost 30 years.
Thank you.
A consensus of several city council members is that I do not need to read into the record my entire testimony, so I will be brief. To be clear, I'm here to ask that you not pass legislation that would actually benefit my bank account. I am a senior citizen, and I am sympathetic to fellow seniors who are not able to meet their taxes. But expansion of the homestead exemption does not target relief to the seniors who need it. It gives all seniors, including my wife and me, a tax break that we don't need. In case I'm sounding unselfish, not really. Our concern is our schools. These bills would be a penalty to our schools, and the quality of our schools affects the quality of our life in this city. And much more specifically, it affects our home value, and that matters to us. Now, the second bill, 19038, would be even more damaging to the school district. I'm told, and I believe I heard earlier, that the loss to our schools would be an estimated $400 million over the next 5 years. How could we possibly replace that revenue? In short, I ask that you do not pass legislation that will penalize our schools through tax relief for citizens like Pat and me. We can afford to pay. A tax break that penalizes our schools we do not need. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, sir. Chair recognizes our next witness, Mr. Spencer.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Council President. I've submitted some written testimony for the record. It's got a lot of numbers in it, and you've been here a long time, so I'm just going to make 2 points that don't have a lot of numbers in them. The first is transparency is a good thing, and I think everybody believes transparency is a good thing. And what the revenue neutrality bills would do is create transparency, because they would force the council and the mayor, if they needed additional revenue to run the city and to provide for the continued improvement of the schools, to just say to people, we need more revenue, and we're going to change the rate. And I think that would build public confidence and address a lot of the concerns that we've heard today. The one thing that I would strongly recommend is that when you calculate the revenue neutrality number, you make allowance for new construction that occurs in the city or for property that's coming off the 10-year exemption or the Keystone Opportunity Zone. Because as new buildings come on the tax roll, the city should benefit from those taxes, and they don't affect the taxes being assessed or levied against other homeowners. The other thing that I want to suggest to you is that you raise the homestead exemption to $50,000. And I can't believe that with all the smart people in this room, you can't find $30 million between the city and the school district to give taxpayers a break. And if you think about the homestead exemption, for a property that's assessed at $100,000, a $10,000 increase in the homestead exemption is a 16% tax cut. For a property assessed at $200,000, it's about a 7% tax cut. For a property assessed at $400,000, it's about a 2% tax cut. I personally think that with all the very legitimate concerns being raised about gentrification, that probably one of the most effective and least expensive ways to combat gentrification is to raise the homestead exemption to provide relief to the longtime homeowners in some of these middle neighborhoods. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony, sir. Any questions? There being none, I want to thank you very much. And at this time, the chair recognizes Councilman Heenan for a motion, recess. And let's say 1:45. You say 3, Councilman? I'm not being realistic.
Did you say 1:45?
Let's say 2 o'clock.
2:45.
Give us 2 o'clock, guys. Yeah.
Thank
You said
you,
three?
Council President. Thank you, President. Chairman, I move that the committee stands in recess till this afternoon at 2:45.
Here, second.
In the form of a motion.
Been moved and probably second. All those in favor, say aye. Those opposed, ayes have it. And I'll see you back at 2 o'clock. Okay, we want to knock this out. Who? Really? Okay, we had earlier recessed the public hearing. We're reconvening, and we will now move to our public meeting of the Committee of the Whole. And the chair recognizes Councilmember Heenan for a motion on the amendment to Bill number 190-152 that was offered in committee on May 15th.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I offer an amendment to Bill number 190-152. A copy of the amendment has been circulated to all members of the committee, and I move for the adoption of the amendment.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and probably seconded that the amendment to Bill number 190-152 be approved. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, motion carries, and Bill number 190-152 has been amended. Chair again recognizes Councilmember Heenan for a motion on Bill number 190-152 as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that Bill number 190-152 as amended be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit the first reading of this bill at our next session of City Council.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and probably seconded that Bill number 190-152 as amended be reported from this committee with favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, ayes have it, and the motion carries. Bill number 190-152 as amended will be reported from this committee with favorable recommendation, and request that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading at the next session of council. Chair again recognizes Councilman Heenan for a motion on the amendment to Bill number 190-153 that was offered in committee on May 15, 2019.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I offer an amendment to Bill number 190-153 190-153. A copy of the amendment has been circulated to all members of the committee, and I move for the adoption of the amendment.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and probably second that the amendment to Bill number 190-153 be approved. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye. Those opposed, motion carries, and Bill number 190-153 has been amended. Chair again recognizes Councilmember Heenan for a motion on Bill number 190-153 as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that Bill number 190-153 as amended be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit the first reading of this bill at our next session of council.
Second.
Thank you. It has been moved and properly second that Bill number 190-153 as amended be reported from this committee with favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading on this bill at the next session of council. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, ayes have it, and the motion carries. Bill number 190-153 as amended will be reported from this committee with favorable recommendation, and a request that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading at the next session of council. Chair recognizes Councilman Heenan for a motion on the amendment to Bill number 190-154.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I offer an amendment to Bill number 190-154. A copy of the amendment has been circulated to all members of the committee, and I move for the adoption of the amendment.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly second that the amendment to Bill number 190-154 be approved. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries, and Bill number 190-154 has been amended. Chair recognizes Councilman Heenan for a motion on Bill number 190-154 as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that Bill number 190-154 as amended be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit the first reading of this bill at our next session of council.
Second.
Thank you. It has been moved and properly seconded that the Bill number 190-154 as amended be reported from this committee with favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, ayes have it, and the motion carries. Bill number 190-154 as amended will be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and request that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading at the next session of council. Chair recognizes. Thank you. Chair again recognizes council member for a motion on Bill number 190-155.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that Bill number 190-155 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and move that the rules of council be suspended to permit the first reading of this bill at our next session of council.
Second.
Thank you. It has been moved and properly seconded that Bill number 190-155 be reported from this committee with favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye. Those opposed, ayes have it, and the motion carries. Bill number 190-155 will be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and a request that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading at the next session of council. Chair recognizes Council Member O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. President. On Bill 190-317, I offer an amendment to that Bill number 190-317. A copy of the amendment has been circulated to all members of the committee, and I move for the adoption of the amendment.
Thank you. It has been moved and properly seconded that the amendment to Bill number 190-317 be approved. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye. Those opposed, motion carries, and Bill number 190-317 has been amended. Chair again recognizes Councilmember O'Neill for a motion on Bill number 190-317 as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that Bill number 190-317 as amended be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded that Bill number 190-317 as amended be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, ayes have it, and the motion carries. Bill number 190317, as amended, will be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation and a request that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading at the next session of council. That concludes the business of this day by the committee. I want to thank you all very much. We have beat the 7 o'clock time frame, which means I do not have to buy dinner. Thank you all very much.